somebody like that. And now we chuckle and we laugh about this, but think the Border Patrol actually has a philosophy: hours, minutes, days. A fence alone doesn't do anything. What a fence, though, does is it slows them down. It takes what would have taken minutes to hours to cross. It funnels them and slows them down so that the boots on the ground have time to get there and pick them up. So the fence is part of a combined arms type of operation, a combined operation that you have, which is probably one of the other reasons why they decided to cut the boots on the ground. They're actually cutting Border Patrol agents along the border as well. If the federal government is not going to secure our border, even though it's their responsibility, I don't care, the state of Arizona should do it. We should put the resources down there, whether boots on the ground. If we need, we can set up some state Department of Public Safety, gang, drug, and immigration task forces that are down there patrolling, and up in the rest of the state as well. But if that's not sufficient, we can put the National Guard down there and put them in a capacity to actually, I mean, whatever it takes to secure the border. Now, this isn't going to be free. It's going to cost us millions of dollars. But it's costing us billions not to. I mean, right now, I just sent a bill to the federal government for $1 billion worth of costs for incarcerating illegals in the state of Arizona. That's just in the prison system. That's not counting education, welfare, and everything else that the state spends money on. That's just in the prison system alone. This is an investment worth making. By the way, I don't know if you heard, but the governor is releasing illegals 90 days early. As one of the budget cutting measures that she's doing, they're actually releasing illegal. If you say you get arrested for identity theft or burglary or whatever, and you're a citizen, you serve your full term. But if you're here illegally, you get 90 days early release.
The way I understood that, she was releasing them to ICE, that they were being released.
The actual order that is provided to the corrections department is you must find 3 placements in the community. Only 1 is allowed to be with ICE. So if ICE doesn't pick them up, you've got to put them in a halfway house or somewhere else. Now, you're right, ICE is picking them up, but they're picking them up and they're deporting them. 90 days is enough time for them to get deported and get back into the U.S. before their natural term would have been over. I mean, if you've done a crime, you shouldn't get a benefit for being an illegal while committing it. I mean, that doesn't, first of all, I don't think you should ever get early release as a budget cutting measure. I mean, that's the one core responsibility of the state of Arizona, is for protected citizens. Before anything and everything else is providing public safety. And so that's the last thing that you should be cutting back on from a budget cutting measure. Besides, I have a better idea on what to do with them in that last 90 days. Send them down to the border and have them finish the fence. I mean, if they make a break for it, hey, you just saved the transportation costs, actually. But, I mean, seriously, we laugh about this, but there is a lot of resources that we could be using in the prison system. I mean, let's look at all the rest stops that are closed. Let's look at all the parks that are closed. Let's set up some state chain gangs, get them out there cleaning those toilets. Get them out there doing these things. This is not that hard to do. All they're doing is sitting around learning how to be a better criminal. Let's get them out there covering those costs, cleaning up the roads, doing those types of things. Well, exactly. I mean, he's showing how they can do that at the county level. He's only got them for a few months. We've got them for years. Imagine what we could get done in that time frame. Plus, they would learn some real skills that once they are released, they could fall back on. I mean, Florence and Picacho Peak are just a couple prisons that were built around the idea of running farms and cattle, and they don't hardly do that anymore. And we need to be expanding that. Now, it's not going to fully cover the cost of their incarceration, but it's going to offset some of the food costs, and it's going to give them some real skills that can be used afterwards. And those are the types of things that we could be using in saving money, or at least offsetting some of the costs that we have associated with are one of the more expensive items we do in government, which is corrections. On top of all of this, immigration, the budget, let's talk about education for a moment. My mom was a math teacher. If that tells you a little bit about, I grew up thinking calculators were cheating, and that gives you a little bit about my history. But I come from a family of teachers. Education is vitally important. My favorite quote is from Abraham Lincoln. He said, and he's got a lot of good quotes, but this is my favorite from him. He said, "The philosophy of the classroom in one generation is the philosophy of the government in the next." Think about that one for a minute. When we stop teaching kids how to balance a checkbook in school, are we surprised we have a government now that doesn't know how to do it either? I mean, we've got to change the way we look at education. Fundamentally, we need to start looking at achievement as the goal and the purpose. If you look at just a scary statistic, the amount of money that the state of Arizona spends on education, assuming that you believe the number that there's one teacher for every 16 students. Now, I don't know that I've ever seen a class size that small, but let's just assume that that's true. Even at that rate, less than 30% of money in education goes to teacher salaries. That's a little scary. Why is that happening? It's because the teacher and the classroom are at the bottom of the food chain. You've got all of this filter of bureaucracy in between before the money gets there. What I want to do is put them at the top of the food chain. I mean, if you look at our books, our law books at the state level, we've got more regulation on education than we do for nuclear power plants. I mean, you've got this philosophy down at the Capitol that is one size fits all. And I can tell you, having been at the legislature, they know very little about educating. I mean, some of them, well, and I'm not going to get into that, I can't. They vote on my budget. But you've got to understand that in this process, you've got everybody has this idea, and so they pass a law so that everybody has to do it exactly the same way. And if you look at the way education is funded, it's so Byzantine. You've got all these special funds and special projects, and special this and special that. What I want to do is blow all that away. The state of Arizona should do two things. Block grant the money directly into the classroom. And that's it, except one other thing. What do you need to know to graduate? What do you need to actually learn? That's what we should care about at the state level, not how you get there. That should be a local decision. If you want to have 3-hour class days or 10-hour class days, what in the world should somebody down at the state capitol care about that? That's a local decision. If you want to do, I mean, how do you want to structure your classrooms? Doesn't matter, as long as you're learning what you need to learn by the time you graduate. And now that means a test, because unfortunately, as much as I hated tests in school, it's the only way to prove you actually learned what you were supposed to learn. And this means making sure that we have reading, writing, arithmetic, you know, not only those 3 hours, but history, economics, all of the things that we're supposed, when I say history, I mean including history prior to, you know, the 1900s. You know, let's go back and talk about the founding fathers and, you know, liberty and freedom and all those things that they seem to forget to teach these days. But all of these things, that's what we need to be caring about at the state level, what you need to learn to graduate. And we put the money with the performance. If you have not learned this, you don't move forward. You don't get paid to continue to promote students that haven't learned. That's it. That's all the state should be doing, is saying this is what you need to know to graduate. But leave the rest of it to the local communities. Last I'll talk about is welfare. And this is probably the most important thing we talk about. I don't know if you know, but we've got a serious welfare problem in Arizona. We have more people on welfare in Arizona than we do in school. It is now, when you look at all sources of state revenue and spending, the largest item we spend money on. It's actually eclipsed education. Now, general fund education's more, but once you put in all the various funds of the state and federal government together, we actually spend more on welfare than anything else. In fact, 1 in 5 Arizonans is on the state-run healthcare system. We're by definition a welfare state here in Arizona.